basically played in almost every country in Europe and played in every country in South America with the exception of Paraguay. And, well, I played in Uruguay, yeah, and haven't played in Ecuador, but I played virtually everywhere else. Played in Central America, United States, Canada, Japan, Korea. Of course, these are all with different groups, sometimes with the Pittsburgh Symphony, sometimes with my trios, sometimes as a soloist, sometimes as a conductor, sometimes as a chamber musician, so it just depends.
You made that historic visit to Russia.
Yeah, it was great.
Communism, this was during Perestroika and détente and all those things. What was that like?
Well, first of all, it was an interesting time to be there because you knew change was in the air. We just weren't sure exactly what the change was going to be. And I think that music, of course, especially at that time in Russia, was still a very, very major catalyst for a major international understanding. And I think the fact that the Pittsburgh Symphony was there at that time and that we performed in their most prestigious and hallowed halls in St. Petersburg and in Moscow, I think it bridged a lot of humanistic and humanitarian issues. I think the political issues will never go away. I mean, they always change, they fluctuate, they morph into different things at different times in history. But I think things like music, of course, they're always the thing. It's always the thing that brings people together.
Especially classical music.
Especially classical music. I think, you know, rock music and jazz and things like that have their place, and of course it's great for the masses. But classical music, I think, reflects a certain intimacy and self-analysis and self-awareness that the other music doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily provoke. And I think with classical music, it makes you think. It makes you stop and smell the roses a little bit. It's also an archive of history. If you're taking somebody like Shostakovich, if it wasn't for Shostakovich writing the pieces that he did during that time in Russia, we wouldn't have an archive, a musical archive of what his view of history was. And that's vital. That's vital to our existence to have it documented. You know, now we have video and recorded history in many ways of persons speaking about what happened. But musical archive is just as important.
I mean, you can go sit down and play with musicians in China or Russia or anywhere and never have to talk to them, just play, right?
Well, that's the whole point of it, is you sit down and you just play with people and you exchange ideas in a non-verbal way. And if you're a real musician, you listen. You listen really carefully. It's something they ought to do in politics a lot better. You should listen. Listen to what your colleagues are saying and doing, what their body language is like, what their good intentions are. I really can tell you that in my entire life, I've never played with a musician, especially from another country, where the intentions weren't absolutely positive and forthcoming and really loving, caring, and very humanistic. It's something that I don't think you find ordinarily just in interpersonal relationships all the time. But when you play with people from other countries, generally they're very, very open to playing with you and playing about the music and having a common goal and having a common language to achieve that.
This is a note here about your 2004 Ocean Records released a Cuban Blues Man. Talk about that one. You played in it? And,
right.
Yeah.
Mike. Yeah, this recording that I made with Mike Garson, he was the pianist for David Bowie. I first met Mike about 8 or 10 years ago. We were doing a festival together. He plays in a group called Free Flight with Jimmy Walker, the flutist. And Jimmy Walker used to be the principal flutist here in the Pittsburgh Symphony many years ago. I heard Mike's group, and then he said, you know, would you like to play a piece that I wrote for violin and piano on the program? And I said, geez, I can't play any of this stuff. I'm a classical violinist. He said, well, look at it. I looked at it, and it was a theme and variations on the 24th Caprice by Paganini. And I was intrigued, and I said, okay, sure, let's play through it. And I played through it, and he said, great, and he gave me some tips, and before I knew it, I was addicted. I said, yeah, let's play it. So we played it, and before long, I just was so crazy about the way he wrote and his understanding of the violin and his understanding of music that I said, hey, Mike, how about if you write me some pieces and maybe we can play them or even record them? He said, great. 2 weeks later, he calls me up and said, I have 14 pieces for you. So we played through them, and I didn't know how to improvise. And I have a pretty good ear, but I didn't know how to improvise. So I went to his house every day when I was in Los Angeles for 3 weeks, and I spent 3 or 4 hours with him, and I learned how to improvise in three or four weeks. And we worked and worked and worked, and he just drilled me to death. But we had a great time. So finally, I said, let's record. So we went and recorded. I'll never forget, it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life, because I went in there, and when I did the title song, Cuban Blues Man, I had to do these 2 bars of blues in this rhythm, which I don't play every day in my life. A blues rhythm is something B.B. King does, and he has done it for 50 years. And I tell you, 2 bars, he kept stopping and saying, well, let's do it again, well, let's do it again. Well, 50 takes later, he still said, let's do it again. And for one of the rare times in my career, I had a meltdown. I started getting really mad. I started yelling at everybody and said, come on, you can't tell me after 50 takes that these 2 lousy bars are still not right. Mike just, raised his eyebrows and said, come in and listen. And sure enough, I listened to all 50 of them. They were all terrible. And but I finally got it, like 2 more after that. I finally got what it is they were looking for in that blues rhythm that I just wasn't delivering. And so we had a great time. We made the record, and it's been very positively received. And Mike played it for a lot of his colleagues, and he didn't tell them who I was or anything. When they found out, they were quite amazed, and they said, well, he's been playing, what, for 20, 30 years? And he said, no, basically about 4 months. So I was very proud of that.